This picture shows when we were already relieving Pickle Meadows. Uh, we drove down, starting out in the morning, we drove down, and this is a flatter area in the mountainous area still, but we stopped there to have to eat. So we broke out our little sea rations, put a little stove down, and started to heat some of the chow we had, and you can see that the trucks are parked, and some of the Marines are getting off or getting on, and we are. I don't remember who these guys were. I can't see their face, but what happened there? We spent the night down in this area, and it was still very cold. But what we did is at night, since we didn't have a tent or anything, we unzipped our sleeping bags and combined 2 sleeping bags, and then we would, both persons would get into the 2 sleeping bags, which was made into one, and that way we would be together, and our body heat would help us to not freeze, and all this again was done like they always said, that just in case, because the times were very tenuous at that time, and so they said that there was still a lot of trouble with North Korea, and of course China was coming to help them. So they said that if the Chinese came back down and North Koreans, we had to go back and drive them out. But during the Korean War, they didn't have warm clothing like this, so the Marines suffered greatly, especially at the Chosin Reservoir. But this, again, they told us, is just in case we have to go drop you off in Korea again. And so that is where we are leaving Pickle Meadows. Later on in life, one time, my brother-in-law, Dan Sepulveda, my wife's brother, we were talking here about our adventures. Now, he graduated a year after I did from Nogales, Arizona high school, and he joined the Marine Corps, and of course, he was a very straight guy, and they selected him for what was it, a Marine Guard on the USS Franklin D. Roosevelt carrier, and he traveled all over the world. But one day he came here to visit from Arizona. I was already living here in Cruces, and he says that he had been at Cold Meadow, Pickle Meadows, at the same time I was, but he was with the 5th Marines, so I didn't get to see him. So I didn't know about him until then. He died in 2021 of COVID, but he was a real Marine. Then, when we got back to the camp, we needed to learn something else. And this picture shows the beginning of our training. This is nothing more than a rope anchored at the top of a bank, and then you just learned how to maneuver a rope. Later, we would wrap the rope around our legs, around our thighs, and had a carabiner in front, and that's what we called a Swiss seat. And as you let the rope go on the carabiner, you would travel faster and faster. And so this was just introducing us to start rappelling. Later we would go to cliffs and rappel down, usually just kind of like kicking ourselves off the cliff and allowing the ropes to go. But we didn't allow ourselves to go too far, because if you did, the rope would get too fast and burn us. Then it was my time to leave. Actually, before I left, in must have been the summer. I'm sure it was the summer, but I don't remember what month. One day we were in our barracks, and the sergeant came running out to our barracks and said, "Attention!" And he said, "There is trouble in Lebanon, and they want the Recon troop to go over there." So, and they chose us to go. I said, "Oh my goodness!" But at that time, I had it was already the summer of '58, and my time to go home was going to be in September. So we went into our barracks and sat on our beds, and they gave us a piece of paper, and they said, "We need you to fill out this paper." I said, "Okay." So I looked at it, and it was last will and testament. And so I thought, "Oh my goodness, this means that we can really get hurt." And so I filled it out. I know that I had sent money from Philippines and Japan, because I didn't go out too much. And my dad, I didn't know at the time, but my dad had put all that money in the bank. And then when the Ramon Hernandez died, our neighbor, my dad bought the property and the house and put it in my name. And so I filled that out and I gave it back to my sergeant and said, "That's all I've got in this world." And so we sat there and got our sea bags packed, put everything we had. We got our weapons ready, and then they said, we sat there for I don't know how long. Finally, they said, "We just got word that they're going to send the recons from Quantico in Virginia." So that meant that we didn't get to go into the battle, but I was all ready for it. I said, even if I have to extend for 6 months or even a year, that's something I want to do to test myself, to see if I can really pull off the job that we were learning, or whether I'm a coward that'll run away. And I was really ready to see what I would do, because in training you do certain things, but you really never know until you meet somebody mano a mano in battlefield whether you're going to run or you're going to attack. So anyway, I thought I want to go, but I didn't. So after that, I just stayed in the barracks, pretty much. I would go down to La Vista to see my aunt, and I have always said that the universe always works in my favor. I happened to go down and I found out that Charlie Alvo, my cousin, who lived in Bayard, was coming to Chula Vista to see my aunt. And I met with him and I told him I'm getting out in such time. And I said, "Could you drive by the base and pick up my sea bag so I don't have to carry it on the bus?" Then I had a suitcase also. And he says, "Okay." I don't know how they let you come on the base. I mean, you can't just drive in the base, but they did. And when I learned that, I thought, if Charlie's coming to pick up my sea bag, I'm going to see if I could take my locker box too. The locker box is what they issue you to put all your junk in. And so I told him what day I was getting out. So one day he drove up to my barracks right up to the door. And I'd gone to the supply sergeant and I told him, you know what, I'd like to take my locker box home too. And he said, well, you can't. You have that has to be turned in. And I said, well, I'll tell you what. I don't want to say his name because I don't want to get him in trouble. But I said, I'll tell you what. I'll give you $10 if you just let me check it just like it is. Everything. The only thing I'll turn in is my my little submachine gun and my K-bar. And he waited a little while and said, okay, take them. So I took my locker box, which you don't do, but I brought all the stuff that I had. Some of my uniforms I had here. Eventually they got old, and so I threw all my uniforms away. But the Viceroys is what I used to smoke at that time, and so I brought all my stuff home, including my score books for the rifle range, and the things that I use for my caps, and the life preserver that I used when we used to have to swim in the ocean, and a newspaper, and then my belt that I used for guard duty, and the holster that I used for my 45. So I got to bring all that home, and I should have brought. I had names there of the kids from boot camp, but eventually things started disappearing, and I had my caps in there and things, but in time you look at them and you leave them out, and you just lose them. So that was my locker box, and I brought it with me. I just put it in Charlie's car trunk, and he drove home.
Last one.
Yeah, we're talking about that. Okay. These pictures are when I look happy there, but I really wasn't. This shows when this is not my dress blues. These are the one that they just lend you to take a picture. This is in boot camp, and the second picture, my last assignment in working was being a principal at Bell Elementary School, and computers had just come in, so I used to write newsletters and advice for teachers, and I had also been the GED examiner in Deming for 25 years. So the notebooks in the back are the records that I kept on everybody who took a GED. So there was hundreds and hundreds of people that I tested for the GED. The last picture is at the Vanadium Cemetery. That's where they call it the Alvo Cemetery because that's where my grandparents are buried, my aunts, uncles, cousins. My mom and dad are just to the left by that big tree on the left side of my head. And so that was taken in 2022. A little history?
Yeah.
Okay. A little history of my growing up. I was born in a little mining town called Vanadium. Actually, it was called San Jose before the Anglos who bought the mines changed it to Vanadium. And my dad was an immigrant from Mexico who came here in 1918 during the last part of the Mexican Revolution. He got married the first time to Pascualita Gonzalez, had 3 children, and then his wife died of pneumonia in
1929.
when she was 29 years old. So that left him, and in those times it was very hard. So she left him with 3 little kids. The youngest one, Valvina, was still in diapers. So from there he met and married Natalia Montoya Alvo, and I was the first one in that marriage, and I had 4 other children from that marriage by my dad and mom. I started school in Hanover, and I would take the bus every day. But sometimes the railroad ran from Hanover to Vanadium to Bayard to Hurley, where they used to send the copper from the copper pit. So I started school in Hanover, and then the family moved to Bayard in 1945. And I graduated from the 8th grade there. Then I attended and graduated from Hurley High School in May of '54. I joined the Marine Corps right after high school when I was 18. But my birthday being in June, I turned 19 before I went in because they didn't take me until September. Anyway, I spent 2 years overseas, one in the Philippines and one in Japan, both as military police. When I was discharged, I returned to Bayard, and I enrolled in Western, New Mexico Western. And actually, the reason I started school there, my cousin Arturo Alvo was 2 years older than I. He had been to the university after he graduated from high school for 1 year. So then he told me, I looked for work everywhere, at the mines and stores, everywhere. I had no training for anything, so I couldn't get a job. And so he said, why don't you go to school? I said, me, school, I barely made it through high school. What am I going to do at school? He said, there's a GI Bill. They will pay you to go to school. Then he said, they pay me to go to school? I said, in that case, sign me up. And so I started college in Silver, and I graduated finally in 1962 with a degree in secondary education. Later, I earned master's degree in guidance and counseling in 1970. I started working at the junior high. I worked there for 10 years as I taught several things. I taught English, language arts, history, and then in my 4th year at the junior high, I started a journalism class for the 9th grade. At that time, the junior high was 7th, 8th, and 9th. So I had my pick of the smartest 9th graders, and we would put on a newspaper once a week and an annual, a yearbook at the end of every year. That was very hard work because you had to meet a lot of deadlines. I worked there for the last, until 1972. In 1972, they called me from Central Office and they said, we have an opening at the high school. The counters are there leaving to go to Albuquerque. Would you like to apply for it? I said, absolutely. So I don't know if they interviewed anybody else or not, but I got to go to the high school for 12 years. During that time that I was at the high school, I also taught counseling classes for Western New Mexico University there in Deming. It became a branch of Western New Mexico. And I presented many, many workshops for teachers in the whole district. So after school, I would drive to Columbus or all the schools there in Deming, and I would teach teachers how to look for problems and how to solve little problems with kids. And in about 1974, our principal at the high school was going to leave, and he was the GED examiner. So he said, do you want to take it? And I said, sure. So I was a GED examiner for 25 years. I also taught during my beginning at the Deming Junior High. I also taught bilingual education for some of the kids who didn't speak English well. And then I invited parents to come in. Pretty soon I had a full classroom full of parents learning English. My last assignment was to be a principal at Bell Elementary School. Here this is a picture. I taught bilingual and migrant education, and so at the end of the first year, the parents were so grateful. This is for teaching parents in the evening. They were so grateful that they made me a cake and presented a nice watch for me. This is a picture of the gift that they gave me. During my stay at the high school, I was a counselor, and we had a crafts and art teacher named Rex Smith. He and Art Alva were art teachers. At that time, they had been making the landings on the moon, and so they decided that they invited, I don't know who did, invited Harrison Schmidt, who's a year younger than I am, and so they invited him to come and talk to the kids. So on that day, Rex Smith brought a collage that his kids had made in his class, because it was so interesting about men actually going to the moon. So Harrison Schmidt came to talk at the auditorium. The whole school went, and he relayed how actually Harrison Schmidt was born in Santa Rita, New Mexico, which is right next to Vanadium almost, and he became an
geologist.
And he got to go to the moon, and so when we all gathered there, the first question the kids asked him was, how do you go to the restroom? So he explained just a little bit, and then after he gave his spiel, the kids, he said, "Do you have any questions?" Well, the kids kept asking, "How'd you go to the bathroom?" And he would just laugh and said, "I already explained that." And so that was the kid's biggest interest. How did he go to the bathroom? Anyway, this picture shows on the left is me holding the collage, and on the right is Rex Smith, the teacher. Rex Smith passed away about 2 years ago, and Harrison Schmidt is autographing the collage. So that was a very important collage and a very important event that happened at the high school.
Bell School?
So my last assignment again was at Bell Elementary School for 14 years, and from there I retired. After I retired, Leonora, my wife, and I went to Brazil to spend a month in Salvador with Joe, who had gotten a job there for 2 years, and that was one of our great escapes. This is a picture of my staff at Bell School. Several of the teachers have are already deceased, but this was in 1996. So the one in the red in the front, right by my side, is Lupe Hernandez. She, when I went there, Joanne Kennedy was the secretary. They didn't really have a principal. They had one who was principal for Bell and Martin School, but he was never at Bell School. So Joanne kind of ran the school. That year that I took over, she decided to retire. So she retired, and then I took over. Then this was this is another picture the year before, in 1995. The lady in brown right in the middle, she was a volunteer. Her name was Betty Gilmore. She was a volunteer, and yet she was there by 7:30 in the morning. She ran papers for teachers. She did everything that she could for teachers. It was really a great thing that she did. These are all staff members, including the nurse in the background to the right, and my two custodians, the girl in the middle was the first grade teacher, Grace Woolsey, and then on that side is one of my custodians, Armando Guillen. Then on the other side is Raul Mercado, who became a good friend of mine. And so this is a picture of all my staff. I think at the end of the time when I started there, we had about 280 kids. By the time I left, they built some apartments close by, and they added another wing to the school, and we went up to 380 some kids. So it grew quite a bit. But after I retired, my wife and I went to Brazil, and we stayed there for a month. Leonard and I would go to the beach and just sit on the beach. It was about maybe 50 yards from the apartment, and enjoy agua de coco helado, and we'd go to stores. Now we speak Spanish and they speak Portuguese, but we would go into their like malls are not very, the stores are very small, they don't carry a lot of merchandise, but we'd go like into a leather place for coats and stuff, and we would speak in Spanish. They would speak to us in Portuguese, and we could pretty well understand them. One day we went to a jewelry store, and there was a girl there who spoke Spanish. And so she said, if you want, for a certain amount of money, I will drive you all over Salvador tomorrow. And so you can see the churches and see just about everything. Joe drove us up to an island close by where they raised sea turtles. And here we got to see monkeys in the forest, the jungle. And that was a great adventure for us.